I always like to start by asking a small favor, but tonight, let's pretend we're already sitting together. Just you and me, ready to settle into a story that unfolds like a quiet breath. Imagine the kind of evening when the world feels softer than usual, when the sky holds the sun for just a little longer, as if reluctant to let the day end. That was the kind of evening I found myself driving home after spending the day at my sister's place. We'd had one of those loud, chaotic family gatherings, people talking over each other, kids chasing each other through hallways, the aroma of baked casseroles drifting through every room. It left me with a kind of tiredness that wasn't unpleasant, just warm and heavy like a blanket draped over the shoulders. My nephew, well, technically my great-nephew, Marcus, had asked for a ride back to his apartment. He was 21, tall with that kind of quiet presence that made you wonder what went on behind the stillness of his dark eyes. Some people take up space by speaking. He took up space by listening. He slid into the passenger seat with a polite nod, the way he always did, and buckled his seatbelt like he didn't want to trouble the moment with unnecessary noise. The road ahead stretched out in a pale ribbon, glowing faintly with the last light of sunset. Fields rolled out on either side of us, patches of gold, green, and dusty earth blending together as we drove deeper into the countryside. My old Jeep rumbled along, humming in that comforting way old engines do when they're warmed up just right. Soft music floated in the background, low enough not to compete with the quiet. For the first 10 minutes or so, we chatted about the usual family nonsense, how Aunt Celia had managed to burn the dinner rolls again, even though she'd set 3 timers, how the younger kids seemed to multiply every year, how my sister still believed she made the best macaroni salad in the entire state, despite all evidence to the contrary. Marcus smiled at that, a tiny lift of the corner of his mouth. But something about his expression told me his mind was somewhere else. I've known this boy his whole life, or at least I thought I did. Watching him twist the frayed edge of his jacket sleeve between his fingers made me realize I'd never looked closely enough. There was tension in the way he breathed, as though every inhale had to force its way past something heavy. "Aunt Willa," he said suddenly, soft, hesitant. I kept my eyes on the road but tilted my head enough to let him know I was listening. His voice wavered just slightly. "Can I ask you something kind of personal?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "Whatever it is, I'm right here." He let out a slow breath, the kind people release when they've been holding too many thoughts at once. "Do you ever feel like," he started, then paused, "like you're acting okay, even when you're not? Like people expect you to be something you don't even know how to be, and you're just tired of pretending?" Those words hit me with an unexpected tenderness. I eased my foot off the gas a little, letting the Jeep drift slower along the quiet 2-lane road. His gaze had dropped to his hands. Shoulders hunched like he was afraid of how the world might respond to the truth he'd finally dared to speak. "Yes," I answered softly after a moment. "More times than you'd guess, and some of us get real good at making it look easy." He nodded once, small, almost imperceptible, like he wasn't surprised by my answer but needed to hear it anyway. "I feel like I'm living a life I didn't pick," he murmured, "like I'm stuck inside a version of myself that somebody else wrote." We drove on like that, the sky above deepening into shades of indigo. Streetlights flickered on as we passed through pockets of empty road, casting moving shadows across Marcus's face. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just thick with unspoken things. "You don't owe me an explanation," I finally said. "But if you want to talk, I'm here. I'll listen. No judgment." He gave me a small, grateful smile, barely there but real. And then he talked, not in one great rush, not with dramatic pauses, just slowly, honestly, the way a person speaks when they're unraveling something that's been knotted up inside for years. He told me about graduating, college, and feeling more lost than ever. About everyone telling him he had potential, that he should be grateful, that opportunities were lined up for him like stepping stones he ought to walk across without hesitation. He said he felt pulled in every direction, except the one he actually wanted to go, though he wasn't even sure where that was. Hearing him speak with such rawness made my chest tighten with a mix of sadness and pride. This boy, this thoughtful, gentle soul, had been carrying more weight than any of us knew, and I felt ashamed that I hadn't noticed sooner. When I dropped him off at his place that night, he hugged me tighter than usual. His voice barely broke a whisper when he said, "Thanks for listening." And for the first time in a long time, I went home feeling like I'd done something that mattered. But that wasn't the end of it, not even close. For days afterward, I found myself replaying that conversation. His voice lingered in my mind like an echo. There were moments when I'd be washing dishes or folding laundry or sitting on my porch watching the world go by, and suddenly his words, "I feel like I'm living someone else's life," would drift into my thoughts. It stirred up old memories, ones I hadn't touched in years, memories from after my divorce, when the house felt too big and the silence felt too loud, when I tried to convince everyone, including myself, that I was fine, that I was strong, that I had everything under control, when, in truth, I didn't know who I was without someone to take care of. A few days later, without thinking too hard about it, I called Marcus just to check on him. He answered quickly, like he'd been waiting for the phone to ring. "Aunt Willa," he said, "I was actually just thinking about you." We talked for a while, small things at first, but then he mentioned he was considering taking some time off work, maybe traveling, maybe disappearing for a little while to figure himself out. Well, I told him with a smile he could probably hear through the phone, "If you need a place that's quiet enough for thinking, you already know my porch is undefeated, and I make a mean cup of coffee." His soft laugh warmed the air. "I might come by." And true to his word, he showed up that weekend. He stood on my porch with a small bag slung over his shoulder, wearing that same unsure but hopeful look I recognized from the last time I'd seen him. The sky was cloudless, and a cool breeze carried the scent of early autumn through the trees. We spent the morning sipping coffee and watching the leaves fall, bright splashes of orange drifting lazily to the ground. Marcus spoke in soft confessions about his childhood, about being the good kid, the one who didn't make waves. He told me he wasn't sure what he truly cared about anymore because he'd spent so long trying to be what everyone else expected. "You know what's funny?" I said after he finished. "People who are responsible, dependable, steady, they need room to breathe just as much as the wild ones, maybe more." He glanced at me then, eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. "Did you ever feel like that?" I chuckled softly. "Oh, honey, more times than you could imagine." The day drifted by in easy conversation. At one point we ended up in my kitchen making dinner together. He peeled carrots meticulously and neatly, while I chopped onions and stirred simmering broth. It felt familiar, like something we'd been doing for years, even though we hadn't. That night, when he left, there was something lighter about him, something freer, and when I wrapped myself in a blanket on the porch afterward, I realized I felt lighter too. Weeks passed, and Marcus returned again, this time sitting on the hood of his car outside my house, waiting for me to return from errands. He looked older somehow, not by age, but by experience. Over a bowl of steaming soup, he told me he'd taken the leap. He'd told his parents he needed time away, from work, from expectations, from all of it. They hadn't understood, of course. They worried he was making a mistake. But Marcus wasn't running, he was searching. "You're allowed to do that," I reminded him gently. "Searching isn't the same as being lost." Rain began to fall that evening, soft and rhythmic. We moved to the living room, candles flickering golden shadows across the walls. He told me stories from his childhood, funny ones, embarrassing ones, and I shared a few of my own. We laughed until our sides hurt, and in the quiet moments between laughter, something unspoken settled between us. Trust. A kind of trust that stitched two people together in a way that didn't require explanation. When he left that night, he said something that stayed with me. "You're the first person I've been honest with, really honest." It was a simple sentence, but it cracked something open inside me. I'd spent so many years keeping my own truths tucked away, believing no one had the patience to hear them. Life has a strange way of circling back, healing us in places we didn't realize were bruised. More time passed. The trees shed their last leaves. Thanksgiving crept closer, and one afternoon Marcus called. "Can I come over?" he asked. There's something important I need to tell you. When he arrived that evening, there was resolve in his posture, not anxiety. He looked grounded in a way I hadn't seen before. We sat at the same kitchen table where all our talks seemed to happen. He held the warm mug between his palms and finally said, "I'm moving, just for a few months. My friend has a cabin in Colorado, up in the mountains. I think I need to go." There was a stillness in the room, but not the uncomfortable kind, more like the moment right before sunrise, quiet and full of possibility. "I'm proud of you," I told him, "more than you know." His eyes shone as he spoke. "You were the first person who told me it was okay not to have it all figured out. You made me feel like I wasn't broken, just unfinished." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand gently. "You were never broken. You just needed to hear your own voice again." That night after dinner, we stood by the front door. He lifted his duffel bag over his shoulder and promised to call when he arrived. Before leaving, he hugged me tighter than he ever had. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't forget who you are," I whispered back. "And let life surprise you a little." After he left, the house felt different, quieter, but not in a lonely way, more like the silence that follows a deep breath. A week later, a postcard arrived, a picture of snow-dusted mountains under a sunrise that looked like spilled gold. On the back, in his neat writing, "Found the quiet, turns out it's not empty at all. Thank you for everything." I held that postcard for a long moment, standing by the mailbox with the cold biting at my cheeks. When I finally sat on the porch that evening with a warm cup of coffee, I looked up at the stars, knowing Marcus was somewhere under that same sky, and I felt something gentle settle in my chest. Not an ending, just a continuation, lives moving forward, hearts carrying pieces of each other, a story still unfolding in quiet, beautiful ways.